My name is Anna Mitchell. I'm 29 years old. On the morning of my graduation, the auditorium glowed with light and sound. Families filled the seats, clapping and cheering so loud it felt like thunder. My name rang out over the microphone. Anna Mitchell, Master of So. I walked across the stage, the gold tassel brushing my cheek, a smile pressed on my face. But when I looked to the middle row, the row reserved for my family, 5 empty seats stared back at me. No father, no mother, no sister, just emptiness where my heart had hoped for voices. In that moment, memories I had tried to bury came rushing back. I was 12 again, searching the bleachers at my first swim meet, finding no familiar faces. 16, sitting alone at the kitchen table as birthday candles burned down into wax. 21, clutching my undergraduate diploma, scanning the crowd for parents who never came. And now, 29, the same empty seats. That was the day I realized something sharp, something that cut deeper than silence. My family hadn't simply forgotten me. They had chosen not to remember me. If you've ever felt invisible to the very people who should have loved you most, you'll understand this moment. And if this story stirs something in your heart, I invite you to like and subscribe. Together, through family stories, we remind each other that even in loneliness, we are never truly alone. I forced my smile to stay in place as I shook the dean's hand. Cameras flashed, but none belonged to the people I had wanted most. Each click of the shutter felt like a reminder that I was celebrating on borrowed applause, surrounded by strangers who loved their own children enough to show up. When I stepped off stage, the sound of clapping still rang in my ears, but it felt distant, hollow. My heels struck the polished wood floor, echoing the steps of a lifetime spent walking without them. At the side of the stage, my friend Mark was waiting. He clapped louder than anyone else, his grin wide, his eyes steady. He handed me a bouquet of daisies, my favorite, though my family had never remembered that. "Anna," he whispered, "this moment is yours. Even if they don't see it, I do." The flowers trembled in my hands, my throat tightened, but I nodded, blinking back tears. Mark didn't press. He just stayed beside me, solid and present, the way family was supposed to be. And deep inside me, beneath the ache, something shifted. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was a quiet, simmering resolve. I thought of the box I had kept hidden for years, the box of memories, the proof of everything they had chosen to forget. One day I knew that box would speak louder than their silence ever could. When the ceremony ended and the last notes of music faded from the hall, I walked outside with Mark at my side. The sky was a bright spring blue, the kind that should have matched joy. Instead, it felt almost cruel, as if the world was celebrating while a storm brewed inside me. Mark carried my flowers, careful not to crush the petals. "You did it, Anna," he said softly. "And you did it without them." His words were meant as comfort, but I felt the sting. Without them. That phrase had shadowed my entire life. I thought back to earlier that morning. I had called my mom to remind her about the ceremony. She had answered in a flurry of laughter and background chatter. "We'll see," she had said, her voice distant, distracted. "Emily's shower is today, remember? Everyone's coming." Emily, my younger sister, the one who had been crowned the golden child long before either of us knew what that meant. She was beautiful, charming, and effortless in the way people adored her. Every milestone of hers was celebrated like a national holiday. Mine, if noticed at all, was an afterthought. When I was 10, I won my first writing contest. I came home clutching the certificate, cheeks flushed with pride. Mom patted my head absently while holding up Emily's drawing of a flower as though it belonged in a museum. "Look at Emily's talent," she cooed. Dad nodded, hardly glancing at the paper in my hands. That was the first time I felt invisible in my own house. It only grew worse with time. High school awards, sports trophies, scholarships, they all faded in comparison to Emily's smiles, her dances, her prom dates. By the time college came, I no longer expected them to show up. I simply learned to show up for myself. But standing on that stage at 29, the wound reopened. Some part of me, no matter how hardened, had still hoped. As Mark drove me back to my apartment, I stared out the window, silence heavy between us. My phone buzzed once, twice, then again, texts from my parents. "We'll stop by tonight." "Don't be upset, Anna. You know how important this day was for Emily." I wanted to throw the phone out the window. At home, I went straight to the old wooden box tucked at the back of my closet. It wasn't fancy, just a small chest with chipped paint and a stubborn lock. But inside, it carried years of my life, years of moments they had chosen not to remember. I set it on the table and lifted the lid. The first thing I pulled out was a folded program from my middle school choir concert. I had circled my name in blue pen, excited to show them where I would be standing. The seats had been empty that night, too. I had sung anyway, but afterward, while other kids ran into their parents' arms, I slipped out quietly into the dark parking lot, alone. Next, I unfolded a birthday card from my 16th year. It had only one signature, Mark's. He had scraped together money to buy me a small silver bracelet, the only gift I received that year. I held it up now, the charm still shining faintly under the kitchen light. My parents had been away on a weekend trip with Emily. There was also a photograph, me at my undergraduate ceremony, cap slightly askew, standing alone in the middle of a crowd of families. Mark had taken the picture because, as he told me then, "Someday you'll need proof that you stood tall even without them." As the items lay scattered across the table, I realized this box was more than memory. It was testimony. Every slip of paper, every trinket, was evidence of how often they had chosen Emily and how often they had chosen not me. Mark came over, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "Anna," he said quietly, "this box, it's not just your past. It's your voice, and maybe it's time they finally hear it." I stared at the contents, my chest heavy but steady. Tonight, when my parents walked through that door with Emily by their side, they wouldn't be met with silence. This time, I had proof. This time, I wouldn't let them rewrite my story. That evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across my living room, I heard the sound of a car door slamming outside. My chest tightened. They were here. My parents, and most likely Emily, coming not to celebrate but to smooth things over, to twist the story the way they always had. Mark was already there, sitting on the couch with the quiet patience of someone who knew a storm was about to roll in. He glanced toward the door and then back at me. "Are you ready?" he asked. I didn't answer. Instead, I placed the wooden box on the coffee table, its chipped paint catching the glow of the lamp. For years I had kept this box hidden like a wound. Tonight, I would open it in front of them. The knock came, sharp, confident, the way my father always announced himself, as though doors should open at his command. I let them in. Mom swept inside first, her perfume heavy, smile plastered on like a mask. "Anna, sweetheart, there you are. We were so sorry we couldn't make it. Emily's bridal shower was a once-in-a-lifetime event, you understand." Behind her, Dad followed with his usual firm stride. He gave me a nod that was meant to pass as approval. Emily trailed after them in her white dress, cheeks flushed as if the party glow still clung to her. She carried herself like she belonged everywhere, even in my living room. I stood still, letting their excuses fill the air, each word landing like ashes. Then I gestured to the couch. "Sit." Surprised by the firmness in my voice, they obeyed. Mark remained at my side, his presence like an anchor. I pulled the lid off the box. The faint scent of old paper drifted up, mingled with memories I had carried too long. Slowly, deliberately, I set the first item on the table. The middle school choir program, edges worn, my name circled in blue ink. "This was the night I sang my first solo," I said. "The seats where you were supposed to be?" Empty Mom's smile faltered. "Oh, honey, that was so long ago." I cut her off, placing the silver bracelet next to the program. "My 16th birthday. Mark gave me this. It was the only gift I got because you were in Chicago with Emily for her dance competition." Dad's brow furrowed. We couldn't be everywhere at once. You're exaggerating. I met his eyes, steady. Am I? One by one, I laid out the contents. The photo of me at my undergraduate graduation, alone in the crowd, a certificate from a writing contest that went unnoticed, a crumpled note I had written to myself at 15, promising that one day I would be seen. The room grew heavier with each piece. Mom shifted uncomfortably, her hands twisting in her lap. Dad leaned back, jaw tight, searching for a way to dismiss it all. Emily, however, rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with disdain. Anna, really? You're still holding on to all this? You sound pathetic. Mark bristled, stepping forward. Pathetic is pretending to care about family when you can't even show up for them. The sharpness of his tone made Emily blink, but only for a moment. She scoffed. You don't understand. This family has always done what's best for all of us. I turned to her then, holding up the photo from my undergraduate ceremony. Best for all of us? Or best for you? My voice trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of finally speaking truths I had swallowed for years. Mom reached for my hand, her voice sweet but thin. Anna, we love you. You know that I pulled back. Love isn't forgetting. Love isn't empty seats. Love isn't telling me I'll understand someday while you celebrate Emily instead. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Finally, Dad leaned forward, his voice low, commanding. Enough. Put that box away. It's just junk, and dredging up the past helps no one. But before I could answer, Mark spoke again, his voice calm but firm. This box isn't junk. It's proof of a daughter's life you chose not to see. And tonight, whether you like it or not, you're going to look. The weight of his words hung in the room. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone in my fight. I closed the box slowly, my hands steady now. This isn't about making you feel guilty, I said, my voice clear. It's about making you face what you chose to ignore. Because I've carried these memories long enough on my own. Now they belong to all of us. Mom's eyes darted to Dad, then to Emily. None of them spoke. For once, they couldn't, and I realized, sitting there with the box between us, that silence can be louder than shouting. Tonight, my silence was finally theirs to bear. The silence stretched long, thick as smoke. My parents sat stiffly on the couch, their eyes darting between me and the scattered memories on the table. Emily leaned back, arms crossed, her polished nails tapping against her arm as if this entire scene was beneath her. I drew in a breath. You keep saying you love me, that you care. But love isn't words you pull out when you're cornered. Love is showing up, and you haven't. Not once, not when it mattered. Dad's face flushed red, his voice clipped and sharp. We did what we could, Anna. You always wanted too much, I repeated, my voice breaking into a bitter laugh. Wanting my parents to show up to my graduation is too much? Wanting you to clap for me, just once, is asking too much? Mark shifted beside me, his shoulders squared, ready to step in. But I held up my hand. This was my fight. Emily sighed loudly, rolling her eyes. God, Anna, you're so dramatic. Always dragging everyone down with your sob stories? Her words sliced through me, sharper than I expected. My stomach tightened. But then she added, almost flippantly, and honestly, it's not like they even knew about your graduation. Not really. I made sure of that. The room froze. What? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily smirked, tilting her chin. I saw the invitation on the counter weeks ago. I tossed it. I didn't want Mom and Dad to feel torn between me and you on my big weekend. My bridal shower was important, Anna. I wasn't about to let you steal the spotlight. My breath hitched, the air burning in my lungs. I had prepared myself for their excuses, their dismissals, even their anger. But this was betrayal I hadn't imagined. My own sister, the one I had defended countless times growing up, had erased me on purpose. Mom's head snapped toward her, eyes wide. Emily! But Emily waved her off. Oh, don't act surprised. You know it was easier this way. Anna always makes everything about her feelings. It's exhausting. The words rattled in my ears. My chest ached, but beneath the pain was something else. Clarity. This wasn't just neglect. This wasn't just favoritism. This was deliberate. They hadn't forgotten me. They had chosen her again and again, and Emily had made sure I disappeared. I steadied myself, my hands trembling as I reached for the photo from my undergraduate graduation. I held it up, my voice low but steady. You did this too, didn't you? The reason no one showed up then, it wasn't just them being busy, was it? Emily's smirk faltered. She didn't answer, but the flicker in her eyes was all the confirmation I needed. Dad shifted uncomfortably, his voice hard. Anna, this line of questioning isn't helping. Emily's wedding is coming. We should be supporting each other, not tearing the family apart. I slammed the photo down on the table, the crack of it startling even me. Tearing the family apart? You've been tearing me apart my entire life. You let Emily erase me, you stood by while I disappeared in my own home, and now you expect me to stay silent again? Mom reached for me, her tone sickly sweet. Honey, please. It's complicated. We didn't mean to hurt you. We had to choose where to be, and Emily needed us more. Something inside me snapped. No, you didn't have to choose. You chose anyway. And every single time it was her. Mark stepped forward then, his voice quiet but firm, cutting through the tension. I've watched Anna fight for scraps of attention while Emily got a feast. And you call that love? Number. That's neglect dressed up as devotion. Emily shot him a glare. You don't get to talk. You're not family. Mark met her stare without flinching. Maybe not by blood. But I've been more family to Anna than any of you ever cared to be. The words landed heavy. I felt my throat tighten, tears burning, but this time they weren't just from pain. They were from a release years overdue. Dad leaned forward, his voice a growl. You don't understand what it takes to hold this family together. We've sacrificed. I looked him dead in the eye, my voice cold. You sacrificed me. The truth echoed, undeniable. Emily's facade cracked then. Her lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, she seemed small, her arrogance slipping away. Mom's face went pale, her hands trembling in her lap. Dad's jaw clenched, but his eyes shifted, unable to hold mine. I placed the lid back on the box, my hands steady. You can dismiss my feelings, you can excuse your choices, but this box doesn't lie. These are the receipts of a lifetime. And now you know the truth, that I was never forgotten. I was erased. The room was silent, heavy. My parents sat in that silence, forced to face it. Emily stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no defense came. For years I had carried this weight alone, but tonight, with the box laid bare, I wasn't carrying it anymore. Tonight it was theirs to bear too. The room felt like a courtroom, and the box on the table was the evidence no one could deny. For years I had been the silent witness to my own erasure. Tonight, I was the prosecutor. I stood, slowly, the weight of every memory pressing against my chest. My parents sat rigid on the couch, Emily perched beside them, still trying to reclaim the air of superiority that had slipped from her moments ago. I drew in a long breath, then spoke, my voice low but sharp. You betrayed not just my trust, you erased the memories that made me who I am. Every missed recital, every empty seat, every excuse you fed me. It wasn't forgetfulness, it was choice. And tonight, I see that clearly. Dad's jaw tightened, his hands gripping his knees. Enough, Anna. This self-pity doesn't suit you. You think dredging up old scraps of paper will prove something? Life is more complicated than your little box. I leaned forward, meeting his glare. Complicated is a word people use when they don't want to say the truth out loud. The truth is simple. You chose her, always her, and you sacrificed me to keep your golden child shining. Emily's lips curled into a half smile, though her voice betrayed a tremor. Why can't you just accept your role, Anna? Not everyone gets to be the center of attention. I'm sorry you weren't enough." The words hit like a blade, but I refused to let her see me flinch. Mark stepped closer, his hand brushing mine, steadying me. He turned to Emily, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You talk about roles as if love is a script. But family isn't theater. It's supposed to be presence, loyalty, sacrifice, and Anna has given all of that without ever getting it back." Mom's eyes glistened, her voice trembling. "We did what we thought was best, for the family. We couldn't be in two places at once." I felt my anger burn hot, then cool into something steadier. "You keep saying family as if it explains everything, but family doesn't mean sacrificing one child for another. Family doesn't mean standing by while your daughter is erased. Family doesn't mean telling me to understand while you never once tried to understand me." The air grew heavier. I could see their discomfort, the way guilt and pride battled across their faces. I reached into the box one last time, pulling out the small silver bracelet Mark had given me at 16. I held it up so they all could see. "This," I said, voice catching, "was the only gift I got that year. Not from you, from him, my best friend. The person who showed up when you didn't." Mark's eyes softened, but he stayed silent, letting the truth land. I placed the bracelet gently back into the box and closed the lid with a quiet finality. "This box is not junk. It's not scraps of paper. It's proof that I survived being invisible. And tonight you don't get to dismiss it. Tonight you don't get to dismiss me." Dad's face flushed an angry red, but he didn't speak. Mom wiped at her eyes, torn between defending herself and folding into silence. Emily looked down at her hands, her arrogance crumbling into something like shame. Mark straightened, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Maybe this is what Anna needed all along, not your applause, not your approval, but the chance to stand here and finally be heard. And maybe what you need is to sit in the silence you created." For the first time, I felt the balance shift. I wasn't the girl begging for recognition. I was the woman demanding to be seen. I looked at each of them in turn, my voice steady. "You've ignored me, dismissed me, betrayed me. But from this moment on, you will remember me, whether you want to or not." The words hung heavy, unshakable, and for once, they had no reply. The night ended without a single apology. They left my apartment quietly, their footsteps fading down the hall like the retreat of a storm. For years, I had longed to hear the words, "We're sorry, we see you, we love you." But as the door clicked shut behind them, I realized I no longer needed those words. Mark sat across from me, the wooden box between us, its lid now closed. He didn't speak right away. He just let the silence linger, a silence that for once didn't feel heavy. It felt like mine. I traced my fingers over the chipped paint of the box, remembering how I used to fear opening it. Each item inside had been a wound, a reminder of everything I had lost to neglect. But tonight, those same items had transformed. They weren't just evidence of absence anymore, they were proof of survival. Proof that I had walked through years of being unseen and still managed to stand tall. I thought of Emily's smirk fading into silence, of my father's red face, of my mother's trembling hands. For once, they had to face the weight of what they had done, not hidden behind excuses, not softened by distractions, but laid bare in the truth of my memories. I breathed deeply, my chest lighter than it had been in years. "It's strange," I murmured, looking at Mark. "I thought I'd feel broken after tonight, but I don't. I feel free." He gave me a small, steady smile. "Because you finally put the weight back where it belongs." His words settled over me like a blanket. He was right. For too long I had carried the silence of an entire family, pretending it didn't crush me. Tonight I set it down. Tonight I gave it back. I stood and placed the box gently back in its corner, not to hide it, but to honor it. It would always be part of me, but it no longer defined me. As I turned out the lights, I let my mind wander to the years ahead. I didn't know what kind of relationship I would have with my family, or if I even wanted one, But I knew this. I had a voice, I had proof, and I had people, like Mark, who showed up not because they had to, but because they chose to. That is what family truly means. For years I waited for their applause. But now I've learned to live without it. Family isn't just blood, it's presence, it's love, it's who shows up when you need them most. If you've ever carried memories your family chose to forget, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments, and if these family stories touched your heart, please like and subscribe, because together we can turn silence into understanding and pain into strength.